Welcome to the Compost Pile, a podcast where we break down gardening, homesteading, and more. Join your hosts, David Poole and Aaron Barnhill, as they pile up information and break it down so that you can be more successful in the garden.
Hey, fellow gardeners, welcome back to another episode of the Compost Pile, your podcast for all things gardening, homesteading, anything really. I'm Aaron Barnhill, your host. Always with me here is your co-host, David Poole. He's the owner and operator of Mid-County Farm and Feed, so you know he knows what he's talking about. What are we talking about today, David?
Talking about the topic, controversial or not, of companion planting.
Yeah, so, one reason why I really said this one stands out to me is that I know very little about companion planting except for some of the more like folksy sage wisdoms and stuff like that you hear from old people that hang around feed stores. So I was just curious about what some of the more tested methods and maybe scientific and logical approaches do we have to companion planting?
Yeah, companion planting is really, really broad. It's not necessarily some magical thing where plants are helping each other. You know, there are some plants that may inhibit the growth of other things. Mm-hmm. There's plants that emit odors or scents that can
deter insects.
Insects.
For sure.
Companion planting can be as simple as providing shade.
Okay, yeah.
It could be,
and that goes back to last episode where we were talking about the local environment, sun and shade and all that, right? So that's a factor.
Yeah. So, and then you have companion planting can also be just bringing in pollinators.
Okay.
Attracting beneficial predators.
Right, because if you have an aphid problem, it would really be handy if you could attract the things that eat the aphids.
Absolutely. Or if you have tomato hornworms or cabbage worms, you might want to plant something that would bring in predatory wasps that will actually help you take care of the problem. So really, for me, companion planting is about taking what we've talked about before, and building on it. I've observed my environment, and now I need to use my environment. I need to plant it very diversely so that we can have pollinators, we can have beneficial predators, and then we can group our plants together so that they assist each other in a variety of ways.
Yeah, some plants, so I know that some plants use different types of, for lack of a better word, fertilizers, right? Because that was episode 2, we talked about fertilizers in the soil. Some plants use a heck of a lot of nitrogen, and some plants, what they call fix the nitrogen in the soil, right? So there's that as well.
Yeah, grouping them in two companion planting can also be planting things that are alike together, like groupings of the same plant. Sometimes we might want to plant something in a small group. We'll take onions. We're coming up on onion season.
Yeah.
So we might want to plant our onions in tight groups and with tighter spacing, and plant them as companions, because what we're going to do is we're going to use them to make them grow at a smaller size. Okay. So instead of growing,
because you're putting them closer to each other. Yeah.
So it's an unconventional approach to maybe companion planting, but for me, I would rather have a bunch of medium-sized onions because I planted them tightly over one giant softball-sized onion, because I'm not a big onion eater.
Is that because you don't want to do the fractions when you get the recipes out?
Yeah,
I don't want to have to figure out what this recipe calls for.
If something calls for a whole onion, I'm using a quarter. I love the flavor of onions, but I don't like the texture of certain onions, depending on how we're cooking with them. But a lot of times I don't need one whole giant onion, so I need something more practical. So by using groupings, and planting things together, I can actually provide myself with a resource to grow something to a size that I want.
Sure.
So that's an unconventional way to look at companion planting, but I think it's an important one because people don't think about that.
I really didn't think about that in regards.
I don't need everything to be the biggest it can be. Sometimes smaller or medium size production is really what I need.
And that's interesting that just the spacing can change that, right? The distance in which you plant things apart from each other can affect how big that produce gets.
Absolutely.
And that is companion planting, yeah.
And related to that, one of the ways that you can companion plant is by companion planting with a ground cover or something that can help basically take the place of mulch. So essentially a living mulch.
Right.
So
when we say grounding, that's kind of that's a creeping plant that like creeps along. It doesn't grow up tall, but it just spreads. Right.
Yeah, so like squash, melons,
pumpkin.
Yeah, anything that's going to kind of cover the soil. Some of your herbs, like a creeping rosemary, can cover some of the soil. But something that's going to essentially help you eliminate weeds from coming up.
Yeah.
And also preserve moisture.
That's right, because we know that the sun bakes all the water out of the soil. Speaking on that, I think that a really good example when it comes to companion growing that people can really latch onto is the Three Sisters method, right? That's kind of the go-to one. It's really old, supposedly during the time of Thanksgiving, the Native Americans taught the white people how to do the Three Sisters method, and everyone didn't starve to death, right? So what is that? And I think it will really help to kind of give a good example.
Yeah. So it's a combination of corn, beans, and then also squash. Yeah. So you have your corn, which is going to grow tall and upright. Then you're going to have the beans, like a pole bean specifically, something that's going to be vining.
And pole beans they grow along a pole.
Right.
So some things are actually really that simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you're essentially using that corn as the pole or a trellis material to grow up. And then your squash is essentially your ground cover, which is going to help you keep out competition with weeds. It's going to help keep moisture. So you're using these combination of plants to embed the area. And those beans, not only do they have the corn to grow, but corn is a heavy nitrogen feeder.
That's right. Yeah,
and
that's right.
Beans in the legume family are nitrogen affixers. So that means that they basically can grab nitrogen from the atmosphere, and they're going to store them in their root system. So over time, you cut that plant off and you leave it or let it lay on the ground. That nitrogen is going to break down into the soil. So you're essentially feeding the soil, putting nitrogen available to that corn plant to be successful.
So, and it's funny, this isn't companion planting, right? But it's kind of adjacent. When you're talking about the relationship between beans and corn, I feel like it's probably a good time to even like talk about this. And this isn't political. We're not getting into a political discussion here, but it is about farming. It is about growing. We're struggling in a thing right now in industrial farming in America with these soybeans and, corn growers. And I never really realized that until this year, since obviously I work in the news, so I had to kind of do a little bit of research on this. I didn't even know that we made a lot of soybeans, and it turns out that corn farms grow soybeans in the off season to affix the nitrogen in the ground.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they do it for that purpose, but then they sell it, right? They sell it to other places like China. So, but it's not a high profit margin crop because it's just grown to affix the dirt. And if you just keep planting corn in the same plot of land over and over, the soil will turn into dirt, right? It will go from that living soil to just dirt.
And that's to me, it's one of the core values of companion planting on a small scale is avoiding like monoculture, creating a diverse environment. So companion planting isn't just about planting like fruits and vegetables together. It's about mixing in colors, shapes, herbs, because everything can bring something to the table. So we can look at companion planting, which is flowers. We like to, number one, plant things very tightly. We like to push the envelope with space in a raised bed.
I've been doing that this season too.
One of the benefits is because if I tightly plant, I might not get as big of a production, but I get enough to suit my needs.
Right.
But then I've also created this canopy of plants, and that acts kind of as my living mulch. So very rarely do we have weeds to pull at all, because there's really no accessible barren soil. There is unused soil, but it's covered, and that really helps out. And we'll take flowers and we'll put them in the corners or any kind of open space. We'll do
like marigolds at the four corners. I've heard people doing that.
Or we'll do a big pocket of marigolds over here, and then we might do zinnias over here, or just kind of whatever annual is within season. And we'll utilize those to bring in different shapes, sizes, and colors, because that's immensely important to have pollinators.
Right, because they're attracted to different shades and different colors, and they have things that signal them to come in.
And we don't want to just grow something to universally attract just the most common, the honeybee. The honeybee is wonderful.
It's just one pollinator.
But they're not the most efficient pollinator.
And also, I'm going to say it, this is a very brave and controversial thing for me to say right now. The European honeybee isn't native to here. It's not a native species to here. So before, Europeans brought them here, there was all kinds of other stuff pollinating, right? Things were still producing, flowers were still getting pollinated without the European honeybee. So sorry, bee lovers.
You've got to have that diverse environment, because you're not only wanting to attract like bees, but you're looking for butterflies. You're looking for moths that'll move in at dusk and dark, where they're in there pollinating. So you're wanting something that's going to flower and have different shapes and colors over a longer, wider period of time with a range. And for me, that's been one of the most beneficial things that we've changed in how we're growing, is consistently having color in the garden. I have more pollinators and I have more beneficial predators moving in to the garden space, and has really fortified being able to grow naturally because of that diversity.
Do you have any resources available, or like a calendar where the flowers overlap and you could say, oh, I might want to do that here?
No.
Because I think you should make one.
I've always tell people flowers are my weak point.
Your weakness.
That's the one thing that I can know when generally like certain flowers, like common ones, it's time to plant.
When sunflowers are coming up, right?
Yeah, but or like calendulas, like I can't tell you when,
I don't even know what a calendula is.
Calendula is awesome.
I don't even know what that is.
I don't know when the season is. I'm not a flower guy, and most people growing a garden for produce, they're not necessarily flower people, especially guys. A lot of women love flowers. They're more in tune with that. They like those things more. But for me, flowers are never like something that I was like, oh, we got to have this. But
now they have utility, right?
Absolutely.
So now you're drawn to them for the utility of it. I'm going to tell you one unsung hero of mine in my garden this season has been basil.
Really?
Yes. Well, yeah. So it's been basil because when I grew basil, I really thought of it as just the leaf, right? And it's just an ingredient, right? Because I love to cook. And what you can do is you can grow basil. Look at that. You can grow basil. You can grow basil until it's ready to pick, and you chop the whole thing down, hang it up to dry, and then blast in a food processor. And you have that. But I grew so much basil in my garden this time that I just let it go, and I let it go to flowering. And you've seen basil when it flowers; it makes a long shoot up top where leaves stop coming, and then all along that long shoot are just hundreds and thousands of little white flowers. And I've never seen something that attracted primarily bees, but I've never seen something that attracted pollinators so well as basil.
That's always one of my favorite examples, because I love growing basil. We always grow several varieties, primarily not your common like Italian or Genovese basil. We're going to grow...
there's nothing wrong with Genovese basil. It smells great.
But I like, my favorite is the African blue basil, Thai basil, cinnamon basil. Yeah. Some of those varieties... the flavor is less compromised whenever it flowers. Like Genovese basil, once it flowers, the taste is not the same.
It's not. No, it's completely different.
So you constantly have to be cutting on it to try to keep it from flowering, to keep the flavor like packed in like you want. But the first time I ever grew the African blue basil as a companion plant, the thing got massive, and I mean the flowers were everywhere, and we'd come out and just bumblebees would be stripping whole stalks,
just everywhere.
And then that same plant really opened it up for me for like nighttime pollinators, really thinking about like, hey, there's things out there that lay larvae and caterpillars that are going to turn into moths. And I went out one night for something, and it was pitch black, and I had a flashlight, and I shined it across that basil, and there were moths everywhere.
That's crazy.
It was one really cool. It's one of those cool aha moments that made me utilize basil as a mainstay.
I'm telling you, man, it's been the unsung hero. And I'll tell you another thing, since we're on the topic of companion planting, one of the really classic companion planting is tomatoes and basil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it has this like 1-2 punch. First of all, a lot of the stuff you're going to make with both those ingredients go together, right? If you're making a red sauce, you need tomato and basil. And the other part is that tomatoes are notoriously hard to pollinate. Right, a lot of people.
Well, they're technically self-pollinating. They don't need a pollinator.
They don't need a pollinator, but if they're hard to pollinate themselves, I've seen people go out there with their little toothbrushes and go. You know, I don't know why they do that, but having that activity there, I feel like really helps the tomato pollinate itself.
And that to me, it also says that like. There's not necessarily, some people are going to say, oh, you can't plant this companion or this plant with this plant. It's a bad companion. Yeah. And not to say that isn't true, because there are plants, we said that like inhibit growth of other things. Sure. But most of the time, most things are going to have some benefit. And I think being able to spread things out and not have everything in one area, you can really experiment with different groupings of plants. Really, when I think about companion planting, my go-to when I recommend for people what they should try, I'm always going to recommend like anything in the parsley family.
Okay, sure.
Parsley, dill, cilantro. Dill, we have one dill plant at home. I have enough dill to last 5 lifetimes.
Is it like a mammoth dill?
I mean,
something like
it
that?
grew... as tall as me. We kept just cutting it, drying it, processing it. I have.
And it's so easy to do as well. So
I got I think we have like a 32-ounce jar of ground dill. Like what am I going to do with this?
You have pickles for the rest of your life.
Yeah. But the point, I got what I needed out of it, and I eventually the thing got so leggy and went to seed, went to flower. But I mean, the amount of like swallowtail butterflies and caterpillars that we have gave a home for, which in turn pollinated other things in the garden just by having that there, is amazing. Yeah. And now we still have that same plant, we cut it down almost to the base, and now it's putting on new shoots and we're starting all over.
That's crazy.
And it's just one plant.
That's in the ground, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's in a raised bed, but
it's got enough room, because I've never had a dill do that, right?
But your parsley family is very good at attracting beneficial predators, like the paper wasp. Paper wasps are infamous for picking off worms and carrying them off.
Okay.
That was one of
those worms that eat your tomatoes, that's for sure.
I was, scrolling on the internet one day, and you see a video of a wasp, catching a worm and carrying it off, and you're like, "No way, that's
AI.
No, that's not gonna happen." Like, and then
their wings aren't even big enough.
When you see it happen in real life, like it just like the stars aligned, and I saw it happen, and just like real. Mind blown. Like, okay, like. Planting things together, like don't plant a big group of one thing, like mix it up, and tighter spacings, more diversity, and you're creating like this little ecosystem. And not everything works, but again, it's an experiment. Yeah. And I think you're able to trial. We talked about in the last episode sun. One of the most unique challenges that we face is just you move into the summer and it gets too hot. Yep. For me, like most of the summer crops, I like peas, like purple hulls or Crowder peas are great. I don't grow a lot of them because the rest of the family doesn't care for them. Sure. But eggplant will grow really, really tall.
I've got eggplant going right now. It's still going. Yeah.
We eventually just cut ours out because we didn't have any use for them anymore. But I grew them strategically this year to shade the pepper plants, to see if I could extend my harvest season. Those plants are still there, and they went through the summer where it was too hot for them to set fruit. But we were able to, on some of the plants, I genuinely believe that we extended our harvest a little bit. I don't know by how much, but we used those eggplants to grow taller, and we put them directly where the sun's going to come over the afternoon. So companion planting can be about placement. It doesn't have to be about like when we talk about like this bond between plants.
Right, yeah. It's all kinds of things. There's many reasons why plants could benefit each other. Yeah. It's chemistry. Plants will excrete like chemicals to do that. First of all, chemicals that will inhibit growth of other plants in the ground, chemicals that inhibit pests. There's like marigolds. What you told me what they excrete? What
they excrete chemical limonene.
Limonene.
It's a natural pest deterrent.
That was a thing because I told you I don't know why marigolds work, but apparently they do.
And they say particularly French marigolds are the best at that. But a lot of those flowers, you smell marigolds. Marigolds have a very pungent smell to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's why herbs, even if you don't really use fresh herbs or you don't want to process them and dry them, they hold their own weight in the garden because of those aromatics.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Being they can mask the scent of other things and help eliminate pests moving in.
And it's funny how we've as humans have like evolved to enjoy the taste of these chemicals that bugs can't stand.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like, I'm like, God, basil's so good, and somewhere out there's a bug. Just be like, oh my God, get out of here. It's talking about basil though and all that. I wanted to ask you a question. You may not have the answer to it, but there's always chatter about this one aspect of companion planting that I think can't be real, but maybe you can clarify this. If we plant two things that are fruiting bodies next to each other, can they affect each other's taste? If I plant a hot pepper and a tomato beside each other, can I get a spicy tomato?
I'm not sure.
I've heard that like my entire life.
I mean, I will say that I have a very small growing space because like I intermingle. I literally have like this year we had a purple cayenne, a giant tomato, and we had two bell peppers over here, and then a bunch of other herbs and random things all in this one like 2 foot by 8 foot bed, very very tight together. None of the peppers were hot. Now, does that mean that it could happen or doesn't or can't happen? I don't know. Maybe it didn't happen in my environment, but I have no factual information.
It is kind of it's perpetuated all over the place. And I'll tell you one of the biggest examples ever was the most expensive tequila that I have ever drinking in my entire life was like $400 a bottle. Obviously, I didn't buy it because I'm not stupid like that. But I got the whole spiel about it when I was like, "Here, would you like to try a sample of this?" Oh, yeah, the agave farm is also a lavender farm, right? So lavender and agave were grown interspersed with each other, and supposedly that affected the taste. So I've heard it either like,
it's very possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought you might know.
I think that kind of brings me to light. Like one of the things that I had heard recently is, and I feel this really rings true with gardening, is like maybe you shouldn't necessarily follow the rules because is the rule actually true? Like who created the rule? And I think like this is a good example. Some of the things that you've heard. I've tried. I'm not having those results, but that doesn't mean that it might not help in somewhere else. You have to just get out there.
I've never had a spicy tomato. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to get out there and try your environment. If you had two peppers, spicy and hot, they could cross pollinate.
Right,
that's different. But like cross species, I don't know.
I don't know either. I think that's a good place to wrap it. If I've gotten one thing out of this, I think that I know for certain is that monocropping is bad. Monocropping is not good.
It's not good for the soil,
It's not good for all kinds of things. Just don't monocrop.
If you listen to everything that we've talked about in every other episode, I think it all catalysts together, and you got to have a diverse environment.
Yeah.
So, without it, it's a lot more difficult to be successful.
And play around with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Experiment.
Yeah. Experiment.
That's all gardening is a giant experiment.
Throw some basil seeds out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what are we gonna go over next time?
Next time,
You know what? You guys will just have to tune in. It's going to be a mystery,
I don't know.
Okay? But until then, just keep gardening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.